Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. I hope you're all well wherever you are and whatever you're up to. I'm Lauren, and in this video I'm going to be chatting to you about how to adapt the True Bias Ogden Cami to have wider straps, and also how to add a really little cute on-trend peplum to the bottom of your garment as well. The Ogden is one of my all-time favourite summer sewing patterns. I've got so many different versions, and I can remember going on holiday a few years ago for a week and literally having an Ogden for every day of the week. I don't think I actually ended up wearing them all, but it's just one of those tops that's really nice in loads of different types of fabric, and it doesn't actually take up that much fabric either. It's a nice, quick and easy sew, so it is a really nice one for summer. The version that I'm wearing just now is one of the Atelier Brunette fabrics. It's the Sandstorm and Night design. It's from their new collection. And it's a viscose, it's 100% viscose crepe, so it's got a really nice texture to it. But I've made this garment out of double gauze, I've made it out of cotton lawn, mostly made it out of viscose, I would say. I think I've got a viscose linen version as well. So anything that's nice and lightweight, the drapey ones especially really work. And if you do want to add the gathered peplum on, then I would say a viscose is an excellent choice, because the viscose fabric just looks so nice and gathers. It just hangs really beautifully and drapes well too. So hopefully you've got some either fabric in your stash that you're wondering what to do with, or you've got ideas for a nice version that you can make. I quite often get asked when I've made this in the past, what do you do about the bra straps? You know, do you wear a strapless bra, or you know, how do you sort of deal with that? Because the pattern out of the packet does have quite narrow, fine straps. To be honest, I personally don't really bother about it that much. Quite often I'm wearing like a cardigan with it anyway, but I know that some people feel uncomfortable about that, and it does put you off making the garment. And it is really easy to widen the straps, and you can make them even wider than the ones I've got just now. I guess it depends what type of bra you wear as well. So there's options there, but I'm going to show you the principle of how to actually widen it, and then you can choose whatever width that you would want to do it for yourself, for your own personal preference. So I actually used the same strap pattern piece that comes with the pattern. And if you've got the pattern already, you'll know that with that pattern piece, the instructions tell you to just fold it in half and sew along one side and then turn it the right way around. And that makes your strap, so it does end up being quite narrow. But instead, what I did was I just cut out 2 of those pattern pieces per strap, and then I sewed them down along the long edges and turned them the right way around. I used a centimetre seam allowance. It was maybe like slightly less than that. So that just gives you an idea of like the width that I ended up having. So you could do that, or if you wanted it wider, then the strap literally is just a rectangle. So you can make it wider really easily if you want to do that as well. Just make the rectangle a little bit wider. Now, where the strap inserts into the bodice, you then need to make that part of the garment wider to accommodate the wider strap. It's really easy to do. So I actually traced my pattern out onto some dots and cross pattern paper, which we sell in my online shop by the half metre. It's really good, but you could just use baking paper if you've got that at home, or if you've got some other kind of paper that you like to trace patterns onto. Or you could just adapt the pattern that you've already got by just like sticking a little bit of extra tissue or paper at the side. You basically have to just widen that section a little bit. So I traced my pattern on, and then I just folded my strap pattern piece back by the seam allowance so that I would see how wide it would be once the strap was finished. And then I lined that up with the top edge of where the strap inserts, and then I just added an extra section of seam allowance onto there. So I added on an extra centimetre, probably just a little bit less actually. And then I just basically merged it down to the line. So it wasn't like I was extending the seam allowance on the neckline and the underarms all the way around. It was literally just at that top. I was just making it a little bit wider. So it's kind of like a wedge that you end up adding on to the pattern. And then you just completely continue to construct the garment as per the instructions. Nothing changes, nothing is different. You just sew it in the same way. My other top tip that I want to just add in, if you've seen videos of me using viscose before, then you might know this one already, but I love using the prim forming tape interfacing to stabilise the neckline, especially in this garment. I put it on the front bodice, the back bodice, and the front lining and the back lining. And it's basically like a woven iron-on interfacing that's got a line of stitching stitched within it. So it's effectively like ironing on a line of stay stitching, and it just stops the neckline from stretching out, and also helps when you come to clip into the seam allowances as well, that the fabric doesn't sort of fray or get holes in it at all. It just helps to stabilize it a little bit, and it is so lightweight, it doesn't like make it really stiff or anything. It just helps to support it in a really great way. So yeah, that is also available in my online shop too, and I'll put a link to that in the description to the video. Okay, so that covers the strap. You can make it any width you want, just adapt the patterns very slightly, insert it in as per the instructions. If you want to add the peplum on as well, then to work out where like the level of the peplum is going to be, a couple of options. If you've already made the top before, this is probably the easiest option, is to just try that on, look in the mirror, get a measuring tape and measure from your underarm seam down to where you would want it to be. So for me, I measured to sort of where my like natural waistline is, kind of where the smallest part of my waist is. But you could choose to just like have it much longer if you wanted, or you can have it shorter, almost like empire line. Same principle would apply. So then you just look to see what that measurement is, and then on your pattern piece you're going to measure down from under the arm down to where the peplum section is going to start. Just remember to take account of the seam allowance under the arm as well, because obviously if you measured it on your finished garment, then that wouldn't have been included in the measurement that you made. And then just make a little mark in that. If you haven't made the top before and you want to work out where to actually put it, you could look at the finished garment measurements, which will tell you what the finished length of the garment is going to be. And then you can kind of work backwards from there. So if you know that it's going to be for the size you're making, you know, however long it is, then just measure up from that to then work out where the line is going to be. So hopefully either way you can sort of decide where your peplum line is going to be. And then the next thing that you have to do is then just from that marking where the peplum line is going to start that you put on the side seam, you have to transfer that marking all the way along the bottom and follow the bottom hemline of the garment. So do it on a curved basis. So just make it curved, like don't go straight across. So I just used a clear ruler to do that, but you could use any sort of measuring device to do that. So your line going along the bottom will be slightly shaped, won't be straight across at a complete right angle to your centre front or centre back. Then once you've got that line drawn in, you have to add your seam allowance on for where you're actually going to attach the peplum on. So I added on an extra centimetre at the bottom there. So to work out the size of rectangle that you need to then cut out to be that gathered peplum section, to get the height of it, what you need to do is measure from where you drew in your new seam line on your pattern piece down to the bottom hemline, add on an extra centimetre seam allowance for that, and then so that's going to be the height of it. And then to get the width of it, I measured from the side seam to the centre front and took that measurement, and then I doubled it. So I wanted it to be quite gathered. You could have it even more gathered if you wanted by doing maybe like 2.5 times that measurement, or you could have it a bit less gathered by maybe having it like 1.5 times. So it's up to you. And then that is going to be the rectangle that you cut out, but make sure it's on the fold, remember, because so far you've just been working with your half bodice pattern piece, so whatever rectangle dimensions you're calculating, you'll be cutting them out in the fold. So you just cut one for the front and one for the back as well, and then make sure that you mark that fold line with a little notch in the rectangle along that long top edge. And make sure you've marked the centre front and centre back of your main bodice pieces as well, because it's going to help you to get the gathers nice and even and insert it in later. And then you need to sew your your front and back rectangles for the peplum together. You do that at the side seams. I did a French seam for mine, but of course you could just do any kind of seam finish that you wanted. So then you've got your two side seams and you've got your centre front and centre back marked on what is now like a loop of fabric that's going to be your peplum, and you have to fit that into your top. Then before you come to pin it onto your main bodice, you have to sew some gathering stitches in. So get a nice long 5mm stitch length on your sewing machine. Make sure that you've got long tails in the bobbin and the main thread as well, and you're going to sew 2 lines of stitching, one within the seam allowance and one a little bit bigger. So I was just adding on a centimetre seam allowance for everything when I was making these adaptions. So for my gathering stitches, I did one just within that, so like at about 1/2 centimetre in from the raw edge, and then I did another one at 1.5 centimetres away from the raw edge, so it meant that by the time I was sewing my seam, I was going to be sewing in between them. So once you've got the side seams and the centre front and centre back pinned together, then you have to separate out your long thread tails, and you're just going to be pulling on one side of them and just start to draw on them, and you'll see that the fabric starts to gather up. Now at this stage, what I would say is don't worry too much about how even they are. The aim is that you have to put enough gathers in that little section so that it becomes the same width as your main bodice piece. Okay, so you have to just keep gathering it until those two sort of distances of fabric are the same, and then once you can see that they're going to sort of sit flat and come together, then you can spend time just sort of moving the gathers around and getting them nice and even. Pin it in place with your pins pointing down the way, so it's like at a right angle to the raw edge, and then just repeat that for all the 4 sections. So it's useful to just split it up into smaller sections. If you wanted to, you could even split it up again, like into 8ths. So you could find the halfway point between the centre front and the side seam on the main bodice and on your rectangular piece as well, and snip a little notch into there too if you felt that was going to help you to get it even more even. But yeah, I managed it fine just with the centre front and the side seam, so whatever is going to work best for you. And then just get that sewn on. I always sew, when I sew anything gathered, I always sew with the gathered bit of the fabric like facing me so I can see it. It just makes it a little bit easier to control those gathers and make sure they're not sort of moving around too much, getting swished to the side. And then you can literally just pull the gathering stitches out. So where you'd been pulling on them before, just keep pulling and they'll just pull totally out. And then, yeah, you know, you just discard them and you've got your gathers inserted into your bodice. Finish off that seam allowance, so overlocker or zigzag stitch, whatever on your machine, whatever you're going to use to just finish that seam allowance off. And then you've got your hem to do. Just hem that in the same way that you would have hemmed your top otherwise. So I hope you have found that useful and that you give it a go. It doesn't have to just be done on the Ogden Cami pattern as well. You could easily make these adjustments to any sort of simple top pattern that you've got, add a little gathers peplum onto it. I hope now that you can see it is pretty easy to do that. If you've got any questions at all, please feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll try and get back to you. Thanks so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, then just remember to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on my next video. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye!